take your seats. We are also testing the micros. So please, could I ask you to take your seats, please, so that we can start our session? Thank you. Distinguished members of the World Heritage Committee, dear Director Rossler, members of the Secretariat of the Advisory Bodies, ICOMOS, IUCN, and ICROM, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the chairperson of the committee, Her Excellency Sheikh Yahya, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this orientation session. Much to her regret, Her Excellency Sheikh Yahya cannot be present with us for our first meeting as she is retained due to protocol reasons. She will be joining us very soon. My dear colleagues, as you know, this is the second orientation session for committee members. As you will remember, we have already had one session last May at UNESCO headquarters. These meetings allow more opportunities for exchanges and more time for preparation of the sessions. As you know, orientation sessions are notably dedicated to new committee members and jointly prepared by the World Heritage Center and the 3 advisory bodies. Their aim is to assist the committee members in the preparation for the committee meeting and in the best possible conditions. They aim to contribute to objective decisions by committee members and help to familiarize themselves with the relevant procedures, notions, and topics related to World Heritage. Hence, these orientation sessions are most valuable to help reaching the most appropriate solutions concerning the issues that we will have to address during the next days. I am now happy to give the floor to Mrs. Rossler, Director of the World Heritage Center, and after she speaks, I would pass the floor to Mr. Joe King from ICROM, who will guide us during this session. Madam Rossler, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dear members of the committee, observers, advisory bodies, ICOMOS, IUCN, ICROM, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to join our Vice Chair for thanking you to come to this session, especially as this year we have a number of new committee members. And this meeting, as well as the one we did already in Paris on 17th of May, help us to better prepare and share some of the views, approaches, and general discussions prior to the session. This one here now is especially important to inform you on the details of the session, which starts tomorrow at 10 a.m., the procedures and processes, but also to test the room. So this is your chance to test the room if everything works well. I would like to have a plea to you. Please inform us of anything we can do to improve the functioning at this room and to assist you, especially the committee members. It's a testing phase for all of us, for the microphones, the lights, the equipment. And finally, please smile because you are live streamed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roessler. I now pass the floor to Mr. King. You have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the orientation session connected with this, the 42nd session of the World Heritage Committee. As has already been mentioned, we had an orientation session which already took place in Paris about a month or so ago, and so that session went more in depth on issues related to outstanding universal value and nominations and state of conservation. Because this session is taking place immediately before the committee session, this orientation session will focus more on, as Madam Roessler already said, the procedures, voting procedures, order of speaking, all of the issues that you will need to know to actually carry out this session over the next week. We will also do a brief reminder in relation to outstanding universal value and some of the nomination and state of conservation issues, but the main focus of this will be on the procedural issues related to, let's say, to the carrying out of this committee meeting. Now, we have a relatively short amount of time, or a shorter amount of time than we had originally foreseen, due to the change of time for the opening ceremony that will take place later this evening, and so we'll try to move this session along as quickly as we can, while still giving you all of the information that you actually do need as members of the committee. And I would say for some of you as new members of the committee, since there was an election at the last General Assembly. So having said that, I'll cut off my introduction at that point. And at this point, I would like to give the floor back to Madam Roessler, specifically to make an introduction in relation to the venue and to look at the agenda and the timetable. So I'll pass the floor back to the center.
Thank you very much, Mr. King. Now we go to the introduction to the venue. Next slide, please. First of all, the documents which you need to have in front of you, especially the committee members. Everything is available, as you can see here on the screen, on our webpage. But the most important documents, next slide, please, are all in the basic text, which of course is the convention, the operational guidelines, and importantly, the rules of procedures for the committee. Don't use the rules of procedures for the General Assembly. This is not the time here. Now, all these documents, next slide here, have been put also on a stick, which you can download on your computer by the Bahraini authorities. But the best access is here from our webpage for the 42Com. Next slide, please. This is an important reminder. From Tuesday onwards, we have the bureau sessions every morning from 9:30 to 10 o'clock in the RIFA room, which is the bureau room. And the plenary is then here in this room from 10 to 1. Then from Tuesday onwards for 4 days, we have the budget group at lunchtime in the RIFA room, which is the bureau room, and from 3 to 6 o'clock, the plenary here in this room. Your key documents to organize yourselves for the session is, of course, the agenda, the timetable, even more important, because then you see the order of the items we are taking on, and the list of documents, including the latest revision and the latest documents, which will be distributed here at the session. Now, on coming to one of the key items, the order of discussions of state of conservation and the order of discussions of nominations. This is actually a question which is asked by many delegations. When is my state of conservation report coming up, or my nomination? So we go this year from cultural sites to mixed sites to natural sites. And the order of the discussion of the state of conservation is from Asia Pacific to Europe, North America, Latin America, Africa, and the Arab region. The order of nominations, you can also see in your document 8B, there is a table with the order of nominations, again from cultural to mixed to natural. And we start with the African region, go to the Arab region, Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and then Latin America. As you remember, the committee discussed that. They wanted that we shift regions so that we not start with the same region every year. Now, next slide, please. Everyday lunch break, the break in the evening, we have side events and exhibitions which will be announced here. And the attendance is, of course, free of charge for all of you. And we will be very happy to see you at these side events. There is a web page where you can look at the table of all the side events, but we will also announce them. Next one, this daily schedule is on the screen, and we have a total of 18 side events organized by the UNESCO or the host country, 16 side events organized by the advisory bodies, and 4 exhibitions. Then I would like to also indicate on the working groups that this year we have no operational guidelines group. We have just a budget working group, and which will discuss a number of key issues following also discussions you already had throughout the year for the committee members and a number of state party observers through the ad hoc group which was meeting in Paris. And here you have the next slide, please. You have the, I thought there was a slide on the budget group where it's meeting in the RIFA room of the Bureau. And that's all I would like to say as an introduction to the session. And my colleague, Mrs. Tocharova, will now follow up on the procedural matters on conduct of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rossler. Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the procedural matters and conduct of the committee, it's actually, we have already held one orientation session this year, but we had left those matters to be addressed immediately prior to the committee, so that committee members may refresh all their knowledge about the procedural issues. First of all, on the procedural matters, I hope that all of you have a copy of the basic texts of the convention, which contain also the rules of procedure. And the rules of procedure of the committee itself, you can find them on the page 25 of the rules of procedure, both in the English version et la page 14 des orientations dans la version française. One of the important articles to start with concerning the procedural matters is the role of the chairperson, the role of the vice chairpersons and the rapporteur. And I'll draw your attention to Article 14, which outlines those duties. And the chairperson basically, in addition to exercising the powers which are conferred upon him elsewhere by the present rules, the chairperson is the one that opens and closes each plenary session, directs discussions, ensures observance of these rules, accords the right to speak, puts questions to the vote, and announces decisions. He rules, or he or she rules on points of order and controls the proceeding and the maintenance of order. Now, there is an important question that is often asked: what happens if the chairperson has to be replaced? This issue is addressed by Rule 15 of the of the rules of procedure, according to which if the chairperson is unable to act at any session of the committee, his functions, we have to check the gender balance here, his functions, that is his or her functions, shall be exercised by a vice chairperson in the English alphabetical orders of the state members of the Bureau, commencing with the country of the chairperson. So we have an evidence here how it works today, because the chairperson, Sheikh Khaya, has been retained for protocol reasons, and the vice chairperson of the country, starting with the letter following the letter of the host country, the country of the chairperson, is ensuring the chairpersonship today concerning with regard to the Bureau and the orientation session. Other important matters to be addressed are the speaking order and time limits. You know, that's a very important point. It comes up at every meeting. Every chairperson is facing the issue of time management, and according to standard practice, and there is a limit of the interventions to be made by the committee members for their first intervention and any subsequent intervention, and the interventions of observers, which might be states parties or other observers, that is NGOs or other observers. The speaking order is exactly like that. First, the committee members, advisory bodies, then states parties, observers, NGOs, and other observers. Typically, that depends on the chairperson, but typically that would be 3 minutes for the committee members for a first intervention, and there would be 2 minutes for a second intervention of committee members, and 2 minutes for observers, be it states parties or NGOs. It is, according to the rules of procedure, it is the chairperson who gives the floor, and the question of taking the floor is addressed in the operational guidelines. Often the question comes up whether a state party which has, let's say, a nomination to be examined or a state of conservation report to be examined at the session, whether they can take the floor or not. And the reply to this question is specifically with regard to nominations. You can find in Rule 22.7, according to which representatives of a state party, whether it's a committee member or not, may be invited by the chairperson to present their views after the advisory bodies have presented their evaluation of the site proposed by the state for inscription. The presentation, and this is very, very important for all committee members and states parties alike, because the presentation shall be limited to a clarification of an update on the proposed site, or an update of the proposed site. After this permitted time, the state party may be allowed to take the floor again, but only if a question has been asked to it, that is, to reply to a question, and within a limited time, to provide the information it has been requested for. This provision also applies to other observers mentioned in Rule 8. This is very important to note when states parties can talk, when property on their territory is concerned, and this rule also clarifies that the time that they allotted should not be taken for advocacy, but only a clarification of certain issues on their site or any new additional information. We already mentioned, next slide, I already mentioned the time limits. Typically, this is 3 minutes for committee members, 2 minutes for observers, and that would be operated by a timer, by a sound system. And we shall be very strict with the sound system to ensure, to facilitate the chair in her efficient time management. Questions that often come up and add also invite you to consult, make yourselves acquainted with the respective rules of procedure, the quorum and points of order. The quorum, the relevant rule concerning the quorum is 17.1. At the plenary meetings, a quorum shall consist of a majority of the state's members of the committee. That is when we have, we need to have at least 11 committee members present in the room in order to have the quorum. Points of order, that's something which is also not always very well understood. During a discussion, any state member may raise a point of order, and when such a point of order is raised, it will be immediately decided upon by the chair. The rule is, or not only the rule which is not described as such in the rules of procedure, but the principle is that points of order are exactly what they are. They concern procedure. They do not concern content issues. They concern procedure. And the chair is expected to rule immediately. And if the chair has not ruled immediately on the point of order, he or she cannot come back to it at a later stage. If that's been missed, then the work continues this way. Consultative bodies, working groups, subsidiary bodies. I think that has been that matter has been addressed by Ms. Rossler, the director of the World Heritage Center, with regard to our specific groups that we shall have at this committee. There is a general rule about consultative bodies, and this is Rule 20. This is Rule 20, 21, 22. The committee may create such consultative bodies as it deems necessary for the performance of its functions. The composition and terms of reference, including mandate and so on, of such consultative bodies shall be defined by the committee at the time of their creation. What we are constituting tomorrow, or what we shall be constituting, is actually not a consultative body. This is a subsidiary body, and subsidiary bodies are outlined in Rule 21. The committee may establish such subsidiary bodies as it deems necessary for the conduct of its work within the limits of the technical facilities available. The composition and the terms of reference of such subsidiary bodies shall be defined by the committee at the time of their creation. These bodies can only be constituted from amongst states parties, members of the committee. Amendments. You'd be certainly, all of you, interested how it will work, how we shall organize our work with the amendments, as undoubtedly there would be a certain number of amendments at least during the session, and usually they go to quite a large number. The relevant rules, in order to make the presentation shorter, given the little time that we have, the relevant rule is Rule 23. At the request of any member of the committee, supported by 2 other members, discussions of any motion, resolution, or amendment may be suspended until the written text is circulated in the working languages. There is, in the last paragraph of this rule, it is also provided that new draft decisions or proposals or amendment need to be made whenever possible, need to be submitted 24 hours in advance prior to the discussion of the agenda concerned. And the rapporteur shall work closely with the Secretariat in this regard. Now, as you can see, the rule says whenever possible, but it is important, it has been indicated by the chairperson during the Bureau meeting today and possibly at the opening tomorrow, that is, it's of utmost importance to submit any amendments or substantial proposals that you may have well in advance by respecting the 24 hours timeline in order to ensure an informed and transparent discussion, so that the Secretariat, by working with the rapporteur, can prepare the text, can translate them, can make the copies, distribute them, and put them upload them online, so that they could be easily accessible to the committee members and, of course, also observers. Many of you who have been members of the committee or attending the sessions of the committee over the years, you know about these amendments, and you call them the blue paper, because all amendments are traditionally printed on blue paper so that they can be easily recognizable. They would be distributed to the committee members and they would be available in the room. And as soon as possible and as much as the technical conditions allow, they would be made available online. What is very important for the committee members, I want to draw your attention here. It's preferably all these amendments have to be submitted, or preferably they should be submitted in electronic format. The Secretariat will send the blue paper electronic format, the template, to all the delegations of the committee members, so that you have them at your disposal, and then you can prepare your amendments and send them to the email of the rapporteur that you see in front of you. Meanwhile, the Secretariat will also consult you to make sure to which email addresses we have to send these blue forms. Voting is another major issue, and the voting major issue, hopefully we don't have to vote. You know, this committee is a committee that mostly over the years has functioned on the basis of consensus, and very rarely the voting procedures have been used. Nonetheless, voting, it's important to be aware how voting works, and you have the relevant articles describing the voting procedure, the voting rights, the majority, in rules starting from 35 until 42. And this sub-chapter or chapter is chapter 7, which is voting. Voting rights, you know, all of you committee members have one vote in the committee. After the chairperson has announced the beginning of a vote, no one shall or can interrupt the voting, except if this is a point of order. A very important point, majority. It's 2/3 majority, Rule 37, 2/3 majority on matters covered by the provisions of the Convention, and a simple majority on other matters. Now, the question often comes up, what is actually matters covered by the Convention, what is not matters, what is other matters. And just to give you one example, and this is just simply an example, let's say when the vote is about placing a property on the list of World Heritage in danger, of course, this is a matter covered by the Convention. And of course, the majority is a 2/3 majority. While if you are discussing whether you want to vote, whether you want to stop for lunch at 1 o'clock or at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then it's just a simple procedural matter and a simple majority is needed. If there is no agreement whether a matter is covered by the Convention or not, then there can be a preliminary vote between you to decide whether a matter is covered by the convention or not. Do we have more about voting? It is important to note Rule 39, counting the votes. States parties present and voting shall mean states parties casting an affirmative or negative vote. This is to remember and to recall that abstaining from voting shall be regarded as not voting. I'm not sure that we have to give an example here, but we can very well give the example. 21 committee members, of which all are here in the room, but only one part cast votes and the other part abstain. And if we have 7 states committee members that have abstained, of course that would reduce the required majority, be it 2/3 or a simple majority. So you have to be well aware that if you decide to abstain from a vote on a given matter, you would be considered as non-voting, and the majority, required majority cap will be lowered. A secret ballot, a decision shall be voted by secret ballot whenever 2 or more states parties shall request to do so. We can have there could be a secret ballot. You see on the screens in front of you, we have the ballot box. If needed, hopefully we'll continue our good traditions to work based on consensus. If we move to the next slides, we have a slide with simple majority. Maybe we can just put it on the screen to give the examples about the votes. And that's the simple majority slide. So if we have 20 recorded votes, 11 are required for the proposal to pass when we are deciding whether to break for lunch at 1 o'clock or at 2 o'clock, to give my previous example, on a case that's not covered by the convention. So what we need is 11 votes at least in order to for the decision to pass. And the last slide here, the 2/3 majority, you can see if we have 20 recorded votes, then what is proposed, what is required for a proposal to pass are 14 votes, 2/3. That would cover the case of the inscription on the danger list, that would cover the case of delisting, and that would cover other serious issues that are covered under the convention itself. I think that was the last slide on procedures, and there might be questions on those matters. We may need to come back to them during the session itself. We shall have at that time the legal advisor present with us, who can provide more precise information and interpretation on the issues at hand. But feel free now or at a later stage to ask questions if you have any. Thank you very much, Madam Roessler. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tocharova. And as I thank you, I would ask you if there are any need, if there is any need for further clarifications on your side on the explanation that has just been given. I can see Australia. Yeah, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And in the spirit of the testing of the room, I just would make an observation that if there continues to be camera wobble behind you, we may need a budget for seasickness tablets for those of us who are watching the screen. Just wanted to get some guidance, please. In amongst all of the papers, there are a number of pieces of advice coming from the advisory bodies about the procedures around both state of conservation and around the nomination process, and in particular the assessment of nominations, the time frame, the referral and deferral process. Anything relating to state of conservation self-evidently can be dealt with under General Decision 7, but there isn't an equivalent general decision in relation to the nominations process. So there are recommendations for an extension by 12 months from ICOMOS of the time taken to assess nominations. There are some observations about the need potentially to review the referral process in the context of the reopening of the operational guidelines at the next committee meeting. It would be good to understand if we were to seek to bring forward a draft decision for discussion, where in the agenda that would happen. Would we ideally bring it forward at the opening of agenda item 8?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to Australia for the question. It is, of course, up to the committee to decide this, but you would have different options. And I agree with you, it was a very wise decision of the committee to have a general decision on state of conservation, which is decision number 7. And if the committee wishes to decide to have a general decision under item 8B, for example, or 8, I would suggest that you consult among yourselves to come up with such a decision throughout the debate. And we would actually appreciate that, because that would provide more guidance to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Well, I would now ask if the advisory bodies would like to add any comments to the explanation Madam Rosler has just given. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we in the advisory bodies would support such an initiative. I think the opportunity to look at the more strategic issues, the reform processes that are under discussion through various mechanisms, I think would find a more logical home in such an approach. So from AUCN's point of view, we would support that type of initiative if it was brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more comments, questions? Pass to you. Thank you so much. I would like now to pass the floor to Ikram, who will also make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will now make a brief presentation on outstanding universal value. We like to do this at every orientation session simply to remind committee members that this is really the basis on which almost all or all of your decisions will be resting, and that is true for state of conservation. It is true for nominations, and it's true for most of the discussions that you will have before you over the course of the next week. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Now, before I go specifically into OUV, Outstanding Universal Value, again, just as a reminder, we always talk about the World Heritage Convention, but the truth of the matter is that the convention is actually called the Convention Concerning the Protection of the World's Cultural and Natural Heritage. And I've underlined, as you can see on the screen, the word protection, because in the end, the listing of a property on the World Heritage List is only the first step in what should be a process of protection which goes to future generations. And so I just want to outline the fact that, again, although the most exciting part of these meetings is putting new sites on the World Heritage List, but that really what the convention is about is protecting the world's cultural and natural heritage. Next slide, please. According to the operational guidelines, outstanding universal value means cultural or natural significance, which is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and to be of common importance for present and future generations. And as such, the permanent protection of that heritage is of the highest importance to the international community. So that's really the purpose of our coming together here once a year for you all to come together here as the World Heritage Committee on an annual basis. Next slide, please. Now you've all seen this diagram before, which I need to credit IUCN for. Which talks about what are the three pillars of outstanding universal value. Well, if you look at the operational guidelines, and you'll see the relevant paragraphs in the blue dots, so it's 77, 78, and 79. In order to have outstanding universal value, it is important for a property to meet one or more of the 10 criteria which are established within the operational guidelines. It is necessary for that property to have integrity, and that's true for all properties that are being discussed. And it is also true for those nominated under criteria 1 through 6, that is the cultural criteria, to have authenticity. Finally, and just as importantly, and something I think that sometimes gets lost in the discussion, is that there is a need to ensure that there is adequate protection and adequate management to ensure that the property can sustain the value over time. And therefore, protection and management is also one of the key pillars of outstanding universal value. Just a word also about criteria. I used to have a slide here which showed a triangle, which showed that that you have many different kinds of properties around the world with local values, with national values, with regional values, and it's really only those properties that have outstanding universal value that are considered to meet the criteria. And indeed, if you look at the criteria, you'll see words like an outstanding example or a unique example. So obviously, in order to reach this level of value, it's really something that is outstanding at an international basis, at a universal basis. And so to meet the criteria, you need to be able to show that, in addition to showing the integrity and the authenticity and the protection and management. Next slide. And many of you have seen this slide also. If any one of those pillars, and in this case I used protection and management, falls out, then we don't have outstanding universal value. And you, as the committee, when you're making your decisions, again, both in terms of new nominations, but also in terms of state of conservation, that if there is not the adequate protection and management, it means that outstanding universal value is not present. But again, as I said, that is also true if it doesn't meet the criteria fully, or if it does not have adequate integrity and or authenticity. Next slide, please. So to be brief, because I know we actually do have to close this session relatively quickly. As you know, when you're approving new sites on the World Heritage List, you will be asked also to approve a statement of outstanding universal value. And that statement of outstanding universal value will provide a brief synthesis related to the site, talking about what the site is, where it is, and why it's important. And in particular, it will also mention many of the attributes or the important attributes of that site which carry the outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. Next slide. Keep going. The second part of the statement of outstanding universal value will be the criteria. And for each criteria, there will be a paragraph, and that paragraph will lay out in a very clear and concise manner exactly why this particular property meets this particular criteria. And so there will be one for each of the criteria for which the site is inscribed. Next slide, please, and the next one after that. Thank you. There's also a need to show that the property has integrity, and by integrity we mean that it includes all of the elements necessary to express its outstanding universal value. that it is of adequate size to ensure a complete representation of the features, and that it does not suffer adverse effects from development and or neglect. Next slide. For cultural properties, as I said, those nominated under criteria 1 through 6, there is also a need to meet the test of authenticity. That is ensuring that the property is truthful, that it is genuine, and that its attributes actually do clearly and genuinely carry the values for which it is being inscribed on the World Heritage List. Next slide, please. And finally, as I said, very importantly, is the protection and management. And each of these statements of outstanding universal value will indeed lay out what the framework for protection is for the OUV, what the legal system is, what the management system is, what the staff resources and financial resources are, and also very importantly, what the long-term challenges are for the protection and management of that particular property. Next slide, please. I think that's it, right? So it's very important, again, this is a very brief reminder of outstanding universal value, but it is important to remember that these statements of outstanding universal value are the basic documents that you as committee members need to use to assess whether a property actually should be inscribed on the World Heritage List, but also of great importance when looking at state of conservation issues, judging the state of conservation of the property, because the statement of outstanding universal value is essentially the judge, or is the statement that you need to judge the state of conservation by. So it's important to understand what that outstanding universal value is. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I finished the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very clear presentation. Before we pass to the next topic on nominations, I would like to know if there are any questions on your side. I see none, so I pass the floor to Mr. Balsamo, who will make his exposé about nominations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will go very quickly about this part. Next slide, please. As was said briefly in the Bureau meeting, we have 29 nominations that are scheduled to be examined at this session for the time being. 5 natural, 3 mixed, and 21 cultural, with 22 new nominations, 1 significant boundary modification, and 6 nominations that were deferred or referred in previous session by the committee. So far, 4 nominations have been withdrawn, and we have also to discuss, after the end of the discussion of nomination, 8 minor modification of boundaries. Next slide, please. Here we have the same statistics, but looking at different division between natural, mixed, and cultural nominations. Next slide. And here the same between different regions. What is important to underline is that there may still be withdrawals occurring between now and the actual opening of item 8B on Friday. And we will announce the list of withdrawn nomination at the opening of item 8B on the afternoon of Friday. Next slide. As already announced, this is the order of discussion: cultural, mixed, natural, starting from Africa and then on to the other regions, and at the end the minor modification of boundaries. Next slide. In what concerns the related documentation, next slide, please. You have all what you need in order to take your decisions, informed decisions, on the website of the center and the special chapter on the 42nd session of the committee, where you can find also the full text of the nomination. Next slide, please. The evaluation of the advisory bodies, of course, along with the working documents relating to the nomination with the proposed draft decision. Next slide, please. And as I said, you have the full text of all nominations that are still scheduled in the agenda that are available, along with the additional information that was provided during the nomination process and all relevant documentation and correspondence attached to it. Next slide. Okay, and next slide. So, talking about the role of the World Heritage Committee, next slide, please. We like to recall in a short way paragraph 23 of the operational guidelines that says that committees' decisions are based on objective and scientific considerations, and any appraisal made on its behalf must be thoroughly and responsibly carried out. The committee recognized that such decisions depend upon A, carefully prepared documentation, B, thorough and consistent procedures, C, evaluation by qualified experts, and D, if necessary, the use of expert referees. We think that this is really important to underline in terms of what is the role of the committee concerning not only nominations, but in this specific framework we are talking about nomination. I would like to also to add that it's important to recall that the convention is not intended to ensure the protection of all properties of great interest, importance, or value, but only for a select list of the most outstanding of these from an international viewpoint. And also that the committee seeks to establish a representative, balanced, and credible World Heritage List in conformity with the 4 strategic objectives that were defined in the Budapest Declaration in 2002. Next slide, please. We also think it's very important to just address one of the issues that are reoccurring, especially lately in the session of the committee concerning nomination, a better understanding of what is deferral and referral may help also committee to take better decision. So we wanted to just remind this difference and say that with referral, basically it's a case in which there's only need for a limited amount or minor supplementary additional information. So the nomination text is the same. There's no need and it's not required to make a new nominations. There's no additional mission, and normally the boundaries cannot change because as there is no mission to evaluate them, it will be difficult to evaluate new boundaries, and no different criteria also should be presented under the framework of referral. This is really, really important to keep in mind because lately we have also seen a lot of nominations that were recommended for non-inscription becoming referral. And this always created a very, very big problem in a procedural way because, as you may imagine, from a procedural point of view and from a content point of view, these are very, very different procedures. It's also absolutely important to recall that in compliance with the convention and the operational guidelines, outstanding universal value is recognized at the time of inscription of a property on the World Heritage List, and that no recognition of outstanding universal value is foreseen prior to this stage. That means that within the framework of a referral, there cannot be outstanding universal value recognized. In terms of the deferral, of course, when this decision is taken, it means that the nomination require a more in-depth assessment of study. So there is a quite substantial revision that is needed and a new evaluation mission with a new nomination that it has to be submitted. So we see that these are very different mechanisms that should be really used in a very correct manner. And these mechanisms are both defined in the operational guidelines, and both of them should be seen as constructive options that can assist the state parties, but in these two different ways as we explained. And I can stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balsano, for your explanation. I would ask you if there are any questions, any doubts about this specific topic before we move on our agenda. I see none, so I would pass the floor to Mr. Villon, who will make a presentation on state of conservation. Thank you very much. Mr. Villon, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Diapo suivante, s'il vous plaît. Diapo suivante. À ce stade, je voudrais juste préciser que parmi les 157 décisions d'état de conservation que vous serez amenés à prendre cette année, il y aura plusieurs cas d'inscription potentielle de biens sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril. Il est important de rappeler que l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril est un appel à l'action et est assorti de nombreux bénéfices. Mais plutôt que de faire un long discours, je vais vous inviter à présent à visionner une vidéo réalisée par les parcs nationaux de Colombie sur l'inscription du parc national de Los Catios sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril et comment cette inscription a été bénéfique non seulement pour le bien, mais aussi pour les communautés locales. Merci. Vidéo, s'il vous plaît.
Creado en 1973, el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catios tiene una superficie total de 72.000 hectáreas y está ubicado en el noroccidente de Colombia, en la región del Darién y Urabá, en los departamentos de Chocó y Antioquia. Limita en el occidente con Panamá, específicamente con el Parque Nacional del Darién, con el que comparte el título de Patrimonio Mundial Natural y Reserva de la Biosfera. Por esto, es también un paso importante para millones de especies y representa un legado cultural invaluable. El parque tiene conexión directa de un complejo de ciénagas y humedales con selva muy húmeda tropical. Tiene ríos muy importantes como el Atrato, Cacarica y Pelle, y un alto grado de endemismo y biodiversidad. Por ejemplo, a pesar de representar una pequeña área del territorio colombiano, tiene cerca del 30% de las aves registradas para el país.
Para las comunidades étnicas, indígenas y afrodescendientes, el Parque Los Catios tiene un significado muy interesante, no solo porque de allí derivan unos y otros su supervivencia, sino porque tiene una importancia de tipo cultural y espiritual. Para ellos, el Parque Los Catios tiene muchos sitios sagrados que le aportan a su riqueza espiritual.
Por estos motivos que hacen del área protegida un sitio excepcional en cuanto a procesos ecológicos y biológicos, fue declarada Sitio de Patrimonio Natural Mundial por la UNESCO en 1994. Asimismo, el parque tiene una rica variedad de ecosistemas, incluyendo bosques tropicales y pantanosos, colinas bajas y planicies aluviales, que constituyen hábitats naturales para la conservación in situ de la diversidad biológica. Por su ubicación estratégica y aislada, el sitio es refugio para una gran cantidad de especies. 450 de aves, más de 550 de vertebrados y 669 de plantas.
Gracias a todo ese trabajo que realizan los funcionarios del parque, nos ayudan a nosotros y al tema de la conservación de los recursos hidrobiológicos y los recursos pesqueros que se encuentran al interior del parque.
En el pasado, el impacto de la deforestación, la degradación de ecosistemas estratégicos como los humedales, la reconversión de los suelos para usos como agricultura dentro y fuera del parque, el conflicto social con comunidades reasentadas en él y la imposibilidad del Estado de ejercer de manera segura la autoridad ambiental en el territorio, sumado a las amenazas por posibles megaproyectos atravesando el área, afectaron la integridad del área protegida. Es así como el gobierno de Colombia, luego de consultas con el Centro de Patrimonio Mundial y la Unión Internacional para la Conservación de la Naturaleza, en su rol de órgano asesor para sitios naturales, solicitó en el año 2009 al Comité de Patrimonio Mundial la inclusión del área dentro de la lista de sitios de patrimonio mundial en peligro. Se enfatizó la necesidad de movilizar apoyos a nivel local, regional, nacional e internacional para resolver la situación que ponía en riesgo el valor universal excepcional del sitio Patrimonio Mundial. Durante los siguientes años, Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia desarrolló un esquema de medidas correctivas, el cual se denominó Plan de Choque con las siguientes acciones estratégicas. Mejorar la actividad de control y vigilancia, mejorando la infraestructura, la asignación de personal y la articulación con la fuerza pública. Generar acuerdos de uso y manejo de recursos naturales con las comunidades afrodescendientes que utilizan los recursos naturales. Generar un proceso de reconocimiento a las comunidades indígenas que se encuentran al interior y en la zona de influencia del área. Hacer una gestión interinstitucional con las alcaldías, las corporaciones regionales y las entidades del sector pesquero para articular acciones en la defensa y protección del parque. Hacer una gestión para incidir en que los proyectos de infraestructura no afectaran el área protegida.
Esta estrategia también involucró definitivamente a la comunidad local, a las autoridades locales, para poder superar los problemas del parque. Ellos entendieron también que estando en la lista de patrimonio en peligro debían participar activamente en las estrategias que llevaran a superar los problemas para lograr que el comité de la UNESCO decidiera sacarlo de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Este proceso ha sido muy interesante porque ha sido una estrategia desde la unidad de parques nacionales en donde se ha integrado mucho con las comunidades, no solamente mirando el parque como un objeto intocable e impenetrable pues hacia las áreas como tal, sino que han venido haciendo durante mucho tiempo y nosotros hemos sido acompañantes en algunas actividades. Se ha venido haciendo un trabajo muy interesante con las comunidades con influencia directa en el parque, las que están en la zona de amortiguamiento, algunas que viven al interior del parque, y eso ha permitido una compenetración muy importante, una articulación fuerte entre las comunidades y la institucionalidad.
La comunidad entre todos, el territorio colectivo de los pueblos negros, estuvimos una relación conjunta con el Parque Nacional, tanto los pueblos indígenas que están más cercanos del parque, hicimos una actividad con la comunidad, llevando el proceso como de concientizar a las personas de la misma comunidad más cercana o alrededor del parque, como el pueblo indígena, Cunadule, que está más cercana, y el territorio colectivo.
Este plan fue posteriormente revisado y ajustado en el marco de la misión de evaluación de la UICN realizada en el año 2011 y se establecieron actividades adicionales, así como indicadores específicos para responder ante las amenazas reportadas. Con base en este nuevo plan de actividades, se estableció el estado deseado de conservación, Este es el mapa de ruta formalmente considerado por la UNESCO para demostrar el progreso en alcanzar las metas. Una o varias estrategias fueron identificadas para mitigar cada una de estas amenazas. Se articularon alianzas, procesos, recursos y personal de distintas autoridades y organizaciones con miras a superar el estado crítico y alcanzar nuevamente el estatus de protección deseado. Como parte de este proceso, se elaboró también la Declaración Retrospectiva de Valor Universal Excepcional, la cual rescata los principales valores, integridad, manejo y perspectivas a largo plazo acerca del sitio. Una suerte de carta de presentación en la que se resaltan las cualidades por las que es considerado patrimonio de la humanidad. Tras el arduo trabajo de recuperación, siguiendo las recomendaciones del comité y como paso definitivo para alcanzar la meta de retirar al parque de la lista en peligro, se invitó a una misión de evaluación reactiva por parte de la UICN a comienzos del año 2015. De acuerdo a las observaciones y hallazgos del experto de la misión, se recomendó la salida del parque de la categoría en peligro, considerando que las intervenciones en el área protegida habían dado frutos en materia de conservación.
Para Colombia, la inclusión del Parque Nacional en la lista de patrimonio en peligro es una oportunidad. No lo hemos tomado nunca como un castigo. Hemos analizado los postulados de la Convención y nos damos cuenta de que es la oportunidad para diseñar una estrategia que nos lleve a superar los problemas del parque.
En este sentido, en el marco de la 39ª sesión del Comité de Patrimonio Mundial de la UNESCO, celebrado en junio de 2015, se adoptó la decisión de retirar el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catíos de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Consideramos que se han hecho unos esfuerzos interdisciplinarios. Inicialmente las mismas personas del parque le han puesto todo el interés para que realmente en el parque vuelva a ser lo que realmente debe de ser. Todo esto también ha surtido un efecto muy importante porque también ha permitido de que regrese la seguridad al parque.
La decisión reconoció los esfuerzos del Estado colombiano para lograr el estado deseado de conservación, superando la adversidad y cohesionando socialmente el territorio, lo cual sin duda constituye un avance fundamental en el manejo efectivo y la gobernanza equitativa del área protegida.
Así se hizo y creo que con éxito pudimos superar la mayoría de los problemas más graves que tenía el Parque Nacional. Nuestro compromiso ahora es seguirlo manejando de manera efectiva con la autoridad regional y local y parques nacionales cuidando nuestro Parque Nacional Patrimonio de la Humanidad.
Para que el parque esté en donde está, necesitamos que el gobierno lo siga apoyando, así como lo está haciendo ahora o con más fuerza, para que así también el parque apoye a nuestra comunidad para salir adelante, porque queremos que el parque fortalezca también los proyectos que ha dado o que se den otros proyectos para la comunidad de Tumaradó y para otras también.
Hay otro aspecto que es muy importante, es el de control y vigilancia. Yo creo que cada vez todos aquellos que están metidos en el tráfico se las van ingeniando, entonces no podemos creer que ya tenemos solucionado el problema por nuestro aplicativo y digamos que por la articulación que tenemos con Chocó y Corpourabá. Tenemos que ser todavía más sagaces y estar revisando que efectivamente lo que está haciendo documental corresponda a la realidad, y eso significa más seguimiento en campo.
Todo lo anterior no habría sido ni será posible sin el trabajo del equipo de Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia, que desde las distintas competencias y capacidades ha dispuesto de los recursos requeridos para alcanzar estos logros, preservar la salud de los ecosistemas y los beneficios para la comunidad de los departamentos de Antioquia y Chocó, cruciales en todo el proceso para avanzar el plan de choque y con quienes será fundamental trabajar frente a los mencionados retos en beneficio de los colombianos y a disposición de toda la humanidad.
Bravo. Before we close our session, and after this magnificent presentation, I would like to know if there are any questions on your side concerning the state of conservation. I see none, so I believe we can close the session for today so that we have time to move around and be on time for the reception in our program later on. Thank you very much for your attention.